Laura, can you hear us okay?
I can. Yes, now I can.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Let's go ahead and call to order Traffic and Safety Committee meeting. Start with the agenda, Alex. Alex, are you muted? We can't hear you.
Okay, go ahead. Do you have the agenda there?
Yeah, we can see the agenda now. I'll call to
Okay.
order the Town of Superior Traffic and Safety Committee meeting October 5th. Go ahead, Alex. Let's walk through the agenda.
Okay, well, we have two major items, the Riverbend and the Yarrow neighborhood meeting reports, but we start all the time with items from the public that are not on the agenda. I don't know if anybody here is not for any of those meetings. I know we have several people that are here for those two neighborhood meetings, but if there's anybody else that wants to speak.
Right. For those that are on that are here, either for Yarrow or Riverbend, we will certainly, this is a little different than a normal board meeting. Just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll take public comment throughout and make sure that you're heard. So, but if you have anything not related to Yarrow or Riverbend and you're on now, would be a good time to raise your hand and let us know you'd like public comment and we'll call on you. Okay, Alex, again, for whatever reason in this particular format, I can't seem to see the participant. Oh, there we go. I don't see anybody's hand raised, so assume there are no items from the public not on the agenda.
Okay.
Neil, how do you do raise hand on the screen? Do you know?
And Alex, this is a slightly different format.
Yeah, it's a little trickier because we're in full screen mode right now. If we want to take off the full screen agenda, it might make it easier. At the bottom of the screen is where you should be able to adjust.
Bottom of the string with three dots up at the top right.
Right. And you could also, for those watching, sorry if this is a little different, you could also go, you see those three dots, you could raise hand. You could also put your question into the chat feature, which is a feature on this that is not available in the town board meeting. So either way, we'll do our best to make sure you're heard. Okay, back to you, Alex.
Okay, let me share my screen. Just some updates, couple items that we've been involved in. The Torrey's Peak raised pedestrian crossing. Sorry, this photo is a little, looks a little dirty. It's been cleaned up since then, but the actual raised crossing is complete in terms of the concrete work. We still need some signs and some pavement markings to get it complete. It is open right now to the public. So that's one project that was, TSC was involved earlier in the year and now it's been taken care of and completed. Let's see, stop sharing, get some other ones. We also did some bike lane striping. Get that. Couple things we did. This is on McCaslin Boulevard looking south towards Rock Creek Parkway. And as you remember, we had very long mixing zones. So we shortened those up by striping double yellow lines. And then at the top, we kind of put an edge line to start the deceleration lane going into up to Key Finance. And similar, go the other way if I can find it. It's the, okay, don't don't have the other one. Yeah, there it is.
It was in the packet. That helps.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is another shot going the other way, going, looking back north up at Rock Creek Parkway. And again, we've put those bike lanes and shortened the mixing zone.
So Alex, why? So I do have questions about this. Last time I haven't been in a car in a few days, but I did notice when I drove by last week, it was not striped green like up at Indiana.
Well, we had a cost, a very high cost to do all of the turn lanes. And so we felt, let's go ahead and do Indiana. Let's evaluate that and then come back and do the other ones, because it was significantly more expensive to do all the intersections on McCaslin at the major intersections. So we didn't quite have the funds to do them all.
What's the cost for the green striping? I mean, what am I missing here?
Well, Indiana and McCaslin cost about $19,000 to restripe it based on the Fox Tuttle's plan. That included shortening the A&D lanes and putting some of the pavement markings had to change. So that was the hardest part, getting all that done. We had a cost to do all the intersections, and was going to be another $70,000 to do the 4 or 5 other intersections. So
all right, so now
it's a significant expense, and we had very little time to make that decision. And so
help me understand it, and feel free, anybody that's on the call, why is green paint costing thousands of dollars?
Or before you answer that question, because it looks like everything's mixed in the bucket, right? It's both the shortening of the acceleration, deceleration lanes, which we've already done. So how much is the incremental green paint?
Well, there's some removal of striping. There's removal of markings, and then addition of markings. So all that was how this one got up to 19,000. So there's a number of things that were going on based on what we wanted to achieve, not only the green markings, but we wanted to shorten those A&D lanes. The other ones that we did at Rock Creek Parkway, we just simply striped over the existing dotted lines. We didn't change any of the arrows or any of those considerations.
So I'm talking about both by Rock Creek Parkway, where we didn't change. I mean, I get that there's some cost to effectively painting over and restriping, and there's a little bit of engineering that is associated there. But when we have an existing bike lane, to signal this with, pardon me, the green paint, I guess I'm confused. Why, if the direction of the TSC was to do it, and there's an overrun, I prefer that to come back to the TSC or just be reported as an overrun to done. But to not do it, I'm just a little, I don't understand the cost, but I recognize things, once you get people out on the road and things cost money. But we're talking about green paint on existing striping. For this section, this was a lot of work. And by the way, it looks really nice, although I still want to see that left turn sign, which last I checked was not there.
It's coming, that's been ordered.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So that looks nice, and I'm glad that's done, and it sounds like that costs more money. But we still got to paint the other roads green. I guess I'm just going to say it more definitively. I need, on McCaslin in particular, every place where there's a bike lane and a potential road convergence with traffic, it has to be painted green, unambiguous for me. And if you're saying no, Alex, then let's talk about it at the board level. But I think the TSC has been pretty clear on this. And if you're saying no because there's no money, and great, let's bring it to the board and find money. But
Right, I
this
think
is a
that's-
safety issue.
That was the issue. We had a contractor in town. We were able to get this worked into his contract, but we had a $70,000 change order to a $70,000 contract, which meant I would have had to obviously come back to the board and get that approved. And that's a process, and we can still do that. It's just it was a significant item, and so I can return to the board and get that, that estimate, and we can go back and do that.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm talking about green paint on where there's a pinch point between cyclists and cars on both Colton and by the traffic circle of Main Street. Neither of which have green paint.
Well, and also Rock Creek Parkway where it intersects McCaslin.
Yes. Yes. Colton, Rock Creek Parkway, and the circle. Yeah, three.
Because
three
with the McCaslin intersection, we've shortened the lanes, the acceleration, deceleration makes a ton of sense, but the green paint is missing.
So, yeah, I can bring that back to the board, get estimates of that. We had estimates of all the intersections, including Christensen, High Plains.
Right.
Colton, we weren't really touching, but we had Calmonte. So there are several intersections that we had for that $70,000.
So Alex, if we built a road and it had a stop sign and we ran out of money and we couldn't paint the line for the stop sign, or as an intersection and we couldn't afford the sign for the stop sign, would we allow that road to be open? It's a facetious question, but the answer is no, of course not. So Alex, I thank you for the update. The Indiana McCaslin looks great. The rest of the stuff does not look great. I think it has to go to the board, but the bottom line is, we continue to be a roads first community, and Neil and I are out there, and Laura are out there talking to the cycling advocates saying, we're here for you, but this is another good example of, well, we ran out of money, so we didn't finish the green paint. And I think we need to take it the same level of focus with bicycling safety as we do with car safety. And of course, we would not open a road without a stop sign or a stop line for vehicles if it wasn't safe. Yet that continues to do what we're not implementing the improvements we already talked about because of budgetary reasons. And I think we got to look at where else we could trim the budget to get this done. So if you could have something for the board to consider in a couple of weeks, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I think we can put this, first of all, we haven't had this discussion with the full board on the bike lanes. And this was an experiment based on the bike lane committee's recommendations and your endorsement. And we really haven't gone back to the board saying, do we want to look at all this throughout town, which is a significant expense. Certainly an item for the work session.
Alex, I'm not talking about throughout town. I'm talking about implementing what we agreed upon a couple of weeks ago, which is green striping on McCaslin. Did I miss am I misremembering what we talked about a couple of months ago when we talked about the green striping? I mean, we have it here, but it's not on McCaslin, but it's not on those other three pinch points that Neil referenced.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we agreed upon for TSC.
Right, and I the staff felt that given our budget situation this year, we had a significant budget item that the staff was in a quandary. We don't have that, we didn't have the money. And so the board,
and Alex,
we should come back to the board.
Yeah, Alex, I'll echo what Kevin said. I mean, the minute you felt like you're running out of money, I mean, definitely flag it to the TSC and to the board and just come back and ask us. I mean, obviously there's delegations of authority and you need to do that. And that's the right strategy. I just feels like this could have been flagged, a month ago and come to the board and not wait for the TSC meeting to where we have this conversation and just come to the board and said, hey, this is what the TSC recommended. We're 50, 80% short of the budget and here's why. And let's get that let's get that addressed.
Okay, well, I'll bring that to the board.
And while we're on the concept, I mean, I really do like what you've done with the acceleration and deceleration lanes on McCaslin. They make a whole lot more sense now. I mean, I'm not seeing cars just kind of stranded, not sure where to go because the lane is so long. And as I was driving home today, it made me think about the Colton Road heading westbound before Rock Creek Parkway. You have a half-mile long merge lane with a dotted bike lane for extremely long period of time. And I think to the degree that bikes are unprotected, it's just a very strange sort of unprotected lane. And what you did with McCaslin, I think, is making it much safer. I'd like you to think strongly about what to do about Colton headed eastbound before Rock Creek Parkway, because it's a half mile of a dotted bike lane.
Right, and that's part of the reason why we did it here. We wanted to see what your reaction would. What is this? What you wanted? Does this make a difference before we go and do all the other intersections?
Perfect.
And again, Colton, do we expand this to Colton, Rock Creek Parkway, and other areas? So I think we wanted a good test situation and get your reaction to what happened here.
Excellent.
It sounds like you guys are okay with it.
Yeah.
And then we can price out, some of the other areas, certainly ones on McCaslin we can still do this year. It's not like we've put those off.
Where's the I forgot what it's called. You guys have some
Pork chop. Well,
Yeah.
the pork chop, I know that was kind of controversial. I know the board, TSC was uncomfortable whether to put a concrete pork chop island here. And the problem is we have a stop sign. Here's where the stop sign is. So we want this should really be moved out. But to put a stop sign in the middle of the area here without being protected, we went back and forth. We had it in there, but it didn't quite fit. So we did not do that at this point. That's certainly something we will look at doing in the future, since this may be a project we do next year, and incorporate that from the day one in terms of the McCaslin overlay design.
So Alex, my preference is, as we're looking to kind of some of those improvements for next year, I'll agree with Kevin and Neil's comments. I love the green striping here. I would really love to see us create some sort of a barrier kind of between the bike. It's hard because I can't point on here right now. But as you're turning right from Indiana onto McCaslin, some sort of barrier to keep people from crossing the bike lane until they've fully merged onto Indiana, rather than scooting across it immediately.
You mean along the bike lane?
Yes, exactly.
Bill, you want to comment on that? Barrier, you mean like delineators? Any kind
Yeah,
of,
just something to encourage people not to go across the bike lane until they're already on already on McCaslin.
So as I understand the question, what can we do to keep a right turning car that's westbound to northbound from
Exactly.
busting out into the immediately across the bike lane into the automobile lane that's northbound? And so that's one of the main purposes of that right turn island that we've been talking about, of making people have to turn right and head north before they can start their merge. And so after that, they're in an acceleration lane, and the safest thing is to keep them in that acceleration lane until they merge eventually later when there's more green in the transition zone. But it would be pretty unusual to put a row of delineators, say flexible delineators, along the edge of the bike lane beyond the pork chop island. Is that what you're suggesting, just so I'm clear?
I think, and sorry, I think if we do the pork chop island, then we're all set. It's more just that even in the last week or so since this has gone up, I see people defaulting to what they're used to, which is going right across that green and right onto McCaslin.
Interesting. So one thought, and then Alex might shoot me later, but you could consider creating a pork chop island out of flexible delineators that are glued down to the pavement and create that island and prevent what you just described without a permanent curb until you can afford the curb as part of a future project. Not sure that's,
And Bill and Alex, I would definitely defer to your expertise on how best to make this happen. You certainly know this better than I do. It's more that I am just still seeing people, even with the beautiful new striping, I'm still seeing people going right across that.
But are they going across that when bikes are present, or are they, just typically they're turning on McCaslin, there's no conflict, so they go right into their travel lane?
Right. And so, I mean, I haven't necessarily seen it when a bike is present yet because bikes are not always on that. But I'm just concerned if people are in the habit of pulling out and ignoring that bike lane, it's going to be a problem when there is a bike coming down there.
Yeah, I think Laura's a good point. I mean, Alex, I think the point is we had this bicycle subcommittee. We had a great design based on the committee, based on the recommendations. And, when you look at the before and after, it's a remarkable improvement, but it is well short. Each one of these intersections is short of what we had designed. And it sounds like a lot of those designs are a result of the cost. And so I think Laura's question around whether or not you have delineators or whether or not you have a pork chop or something, I agree. I want to reduce that possible conflict point, and I think that's necessary. We had the committee. There was a pork chop recommended, even if it's a painted pork chop, solid paint, because I worry about the curb. But that's why we had the bicycle committee to make a recommendation, and we just, from a before and after, this looks great. But compared to what we designed and what we actually got, it's just different.
Well, this was the only difference. I think all the green paint, all the pavement markings are what was proposed and designed. The pork chop, was left out, and it was just a decision. We didn't have a good feel where to put it. We had, Bill had tried to put it in there, but it was for concrete, whether we'd have a sign sticking out in a striped area was something we were concerned about.
Okay.
it's hard to implement with just paint because you would want to put the stop sign in the island, and having it in a painted island is an issue. But that's why I say at the minimum, if you'd have to create an island with delineators short of the raised curb and gutter whenever you can get to that.
Yeah, that's why we leave it to your expertise, right? I just feel like we're relitigating what we talked about a couple months ago. So let's, Alex, maybe a before and after, not a before and after what was designed.
And maybe we can get, some curb stops or something like that. That's, looks more like the pork chop. And then try that as location and see what the vehicles do to that, whether they, observe
This one
that.
doesn't feel like, Alex, let me just try it again. This does not feel like the place to experiment. This feels, I don't want to experiment with things that are possibly not, because this is the busiest this is the most dangerous intersection in town, as demonstrated by accident data with cyclists, right? And so I don't want to experiment on here. I think this is a dramatic improvement. For me, it's just more process. It falls a little short of what we designed. And you're right, it's better, it's close, but let's just look at that. But I would not recommend any changes beyond what we designed without going back to that cycling ad hoc committee you established. Excuse me.
Okay.
All right. That took more time than we thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's move on. Okay, let's see. Moving on to the Yarrow Circle.
Actually, Alex, quick, there's one more thing on project updates and Marshall Road median removal. Do you have an ETA on that or anything else?
Yeah, so we have that design, we have pricing for it. we're just working through several things with the raised pedestrian crossing. We had that work on Rock Creek Bridge. So that's next up. And we're going through the permit process, traffic control process. So I think, towards the middle to end of October is when that's going to happen.
All right, thanks.
So we're all geared up for that.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to talk through this, and Bill was here. We had a neighborhood meeting on September 16th and really was postponed. Originally this was scheduled for March 16th, and you know what happened then. COVID hit and we didn't know how we were going to conduct meetings, so we had postponed this, but we did hold this in September. We had mailed out notices to the entire Yarrow Circle neighborhood. We had 10 or 12 people that attended a virtual meeting. And so we went through our normal neighborhood meeting with these types of slides. There's the Yarrow neighborhood.
Alex, just a very quick question. When you said you mailed out notices, I mean, did you mail notices out to everything that's on this slide right here, the whole Yarrow
Yes.
Circle? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So here's just some of the data recording. We had talked about unimpeded roadway distance. There's no stop signs or really sharp curves or anything to really slow you up. So you have 1,760 feet on one half and 1,830 on the other half of unimpeded distance. Here's the traffic volumes ranging from 1,200 on East Yarrow, 950 on West Yarrow. But down at the bottom of the circle, it drops to 200 to 500 vehicles per day. Speeds were, right around the posted speed limit, the 85th percentile speeds. We did have fairly high speed in this particular area going downhill. This was some of the speed data. I think committee's seen this from the December meeting. Accidents, there were about 4 or 5 accidents around Yarrow Circle. And then we went through the toolbox with speed humps and other things. So I don't want to delay on those, but we had a lively discussion about various measures and where they could be applied. And so this is a plan that we kind of had good buy-in from those that attended. So I wanted to go through these, give you a little more detail. Now I'm going to kind of switch to what I had sent out today because I gave you a little bit more information in terms of photos and aerials. This is on East Yarrow. And the concern was we have a lot of people that are using this trail and then cutting across and using this park area to the west of East Yarrow. And we had talked about maybe a median island with a protected crossing that would serve that movement and also serve as an entry feature for the community. We may need ADA ramps if we wanted to put a pedestrian crossing here. There isn't any trail on the west side, but people felt that this was an area where you have a lot of pedestrians going across. We do have some individuals that attended that meeting that I'm sure would want to comment. I'll go through this and I think they'll probably want to chime in. This could be the type of crossing where you have a median island and a crossing that goes across, similar to what we put on Coal Creek. Location 2 is at East Yarrow and Hyacinth. Number of comments about this intersection being fairly dangerous, especially when you're making a left from East Hyacinth and the sight distance. And so a suggestion was made to install an all-way stop. I'll turn it over to Bill now, who we did take traffic counts. We promised we'd do traffic counts and to see where this fit in the warrants and determine whether this would be a staff-supported measure. So Bill, why don't you talk about this? I know this may be hard to read, but we did have turning movement counts.
Right. So I don't expect you to read this, but when the manual on uniform traffic control devices includes some guidance on when to consider an always stop, and that typically tries to suggest that you don't use stop signs as purely for speed mitigation. So what are some of the other things you'd want to consider when considering an always stop location? You take the peak hour traffic, and we did that both on the side street and the main street. And what the manual says is that you know, if you have about 300 vehicles an hour approaching on the main street and maybe 200 vehicles an hour on the side street, that's approximately equal or enough of a side street conflict that an always stop might be expected and operate appropriately. We'll also look at the number of correctable crashes. Do we have 5 or more per year? And the good news is we don't have any crashes in the vicinity of this intersection that we're aware of. And is it a high pedestrian crossing volume? And will the pedestrians benefit from the always stop? And when you factor all those things in, how does it compare at this intersection of East Yarrow and Hyacinth? And what we see is that none of those conditions are met, and they're not even close. So purely from a traffic volume
So
or
you had me,
crash,
so Bill, thanks for this. So you had me on the first two metrics for sort of on the vehicles, but then you talked about the number of pedestrian crossings. Did we measure pedestrian crossings?
yeah, pedestrian counts were included. The crossing pedestrians were included in the peak hour traffic counts that were taken. I don't have them open in front of me, but there were not a significant number of pedestrians crossing here as I recall.
Bill, when was this data taken?
It was taken, Alex can tell you probably the exact date, but it was taken shortly after the meeting that we had with the neighborhood in September.
Okay,
September
so
20
the traffic
Sep-
data we have is a year old, but then the stop sign warrant analysis is a couple weeks old.
Right.
Because I was trying to
September 23rd.
So
right, because if you try to reconcile the speed data for, I think it's spot 4, you know, the volume there, or speed count number 5, the volume there is, you know, 1,100 cars per day, you know, versus what you're getting at the stop sign data. And I mean, obviously, you know, we know there's a fundamental difference in the number of people walking and driving today versus a year ago. So I want to be careful with that. We don't overly rely on the stop sign warrant analysis taken under, you know, the halo of COVID versus the other data we have from a year ago.
it's a good point. And
But this is hourly data that Bill's presenting here, not.
Okay.
hourly,
Yeah.
not
Okay.
is, you know, so we would expect in a PM peak hour, for example, there's 10 to 15% of the daily traffic would occur in that PM peak hour in a residential setting
Okay.
like that. But even if you were to adjust for COVID and some of the adjustment factors that I've seen where I've compared before and after counts at various communities is even if we were to inflate the peak hour counts that we took after the COVID or with COVID, we wouldn't be close to those 2 or 300 vehicles an hour.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate. I mean, even if you're using a judgment factor of, you know, 50% higher, I see your
Right.
point.
Yeah, Neil, and the point I was trying to make, I mean, I'm convinced on the approach traffic that the criteria are not met. It's just when Bill mentioned pedestrian, you know, I don't know I don't think we've ever measured pedestrian traffic before. And I also think it's a bit of it's a difficult thing to measure. Pedestrians might not be crossing the street if it's not safe to do so. If you make the street safe to do so, suddenly pedestrians may cross the street. And again, I feel strongly that if a pedestrian is not crossing the street because it's not safe, we need to fix the street, right? And so, I mean, for me, that's sort of that third factor is kind of the overriding factor, but that's right. There's a lot to get through here. And this is, you know, a proposed alternative. And Bill, your first comment of stop signs are not effective at speed mitigation unless these things happen. It's a good comment and I understand and agree.
So hold on though. I mean, with the pedestrian data, I mean, I think one of the other parts of this whole street is there's like no crosswalks, right? So what would somebody even cross? Right? There should not be any pedestrian crossing here because there's not even a pedestrian zebra crossing on the entire stretch of Yarrow here or at Haysent. There's not even a crosswalk at Haysent.
No, that's not true.
That's correct. That's why the staff is open to an all-way stop, because you don't have any other place other than at the bottom of the circle for pedestrians to cross in a marked crosswalk. So I
Now,
assume everybody
Alex, there is a marked crosswalk.
at the
below.
bottom of the circle.
No, at the top. Well, okay, the bottom of the circle. I was thinking, right,
Bottom of
right,
the circle
top.
and top of the circle, but
Yes.
not at Haysent on either the east or west side of Haysent, which is a separate problem. All right, enough.
So let's keep going. We'll hear from the public on that, I'm sure. So this was the location of the highest speeds that we had. And there you're coming down from the bottom of the curve, I guess, and coming down here. So there is potential location around here that you could put it that would only affect really these two neighborhoods. It's on a side yard on this side. And you can see the house is stepping down, so the grades are picking up going downhill. So this could be a potential location for a speed hump. In general, I think the neighborhood wasn't real thrilled about speed humps, but this is a location where there was not a whole lot else you could do. And here's the only crossing, pedestrian crossing that's marked. And you can see that the trail system that you have that goes up, then connects to an extensive trail system, connects to a playground. So here's an area that, again, like Torrey's Peak, potential enhanced or raised pedestrian crossing at this location. The volumes here aren't real high, and probably in 300 or 400 vehicle per day range. So that's the data on that one. Going down further at, what's that? This is at Gardenia. And we looked at this, and one of the suggestions here, we had the chokers on our list, and you could put a choker at either this location, at this location where you have side yards, narrow the roadway to get some horizontal deflection. Here's a photo of it. There's already a parked vehicle here, but again, to get narrowing the road, really couldn't do on this side because of the parking situation. Here's an example of chokers in another neighborhood, Broomfield neighborhood. And finally, location 6 where Gardenia comes into West Yarrow. This was another location that was felt that because people are really picking up speed coming from Rock Creek Circle and going up the hill, was a suggestion for a choker and maybe an all-way stop at this location. You can go back, and the volumes seem to be similar here, but a lot less in terms of the side street than it was at Hyacinth. I'm sorry, here's Begonia has about 7 on the side street versus like 13 on Hyacinth. Okay, that's all I have here. I think we may have some individuals that want to chime in. Let's see. Brian, are you on?
Hey, Alex, thanks for calling me and inviting me.
Sure. Why don't you describe the meeting and whether anything I missed in that summary?
Sure. So I think that we had a productive meeting, and our team's goal was to find a solution to slow the traffic. in a way that is the least disruptive to those that are driving at a normal pace on the roadway. A couple things that I could share being a West Yarrow resident are that at the street crossings, there actually are handicap ramps that lead down from the sidewalks. There just aren't zebra crossings, Neil. So there is an indicated crossing, for instance, when you come out of Hyacinth and cross there, and I think the same at Gardenia. So you could put zebras if you wanted to. And I absolutely agree with your data, Alex, that 1-to-9 ratio, it doesn't support stop signs. It's something that you advised could be a solution. If a choker was the solution alone, we'd be happy with that. And I'd also like to speak to the data. Alex, when was the data captured? Was it during the summer or during the school year when people are in a bit of more of a hurry?
The, let's see, the data we had that. Is it?
September 23rd for the peak hour counts at Yarrow, West Yarrow and Begonia. I think all 3 intersections were on September 23rd.
The old data, the year-old data.
Right,
Yeah,
the old speed data, Alex.
Yeah,
was-
because I have a
it was-
theory that people drive faster when they're trying to rush to soccer practice or kids are driving to high school.
It
or
was in
home.
August and September of 2019, late August
just
and
as-
early September.
Okay. Another factor I wanted to bring up is the measurement location at section 5. Cars were entering from Rock Creek Circle at 25 to 26 miles per hour or faster. And that was only 164 feet from the intersection. So I don't know how fast cars accelerate, but you may want to explore how fast they're whipping in. And the other factor is I think that cars on the West Yarrow side reach their peak speed on the downhill around Begonia, and they're probably coasting that 300 feet in to Rock Creek Circle. So if I were to do this and put it to a vote, I might lead with a choker and a zebra crossing. I might measure again at a peak time when I know that there's a lot of people traveling to school and so on. And I would measure at Begonia where I was considering the feature. And I would see if at location 5, they had already slowed down for 150 feet leading into the stop sign. Second factor is how at the top of the hill, cars are traveling 29 miles an hour around a curve, but then at the highest grade downhill, they're suddenly traveling 5 miles an hour slower, boggles me. But I believe your data. I wonder about that. But I won't share anything else. I appreciate what the board will consider, and we want to do the minimal impact solution. Any feedback, Alex?
So Brian, does that mean your minimal impact? So you're not just speaking on yourself as a West Yarrow resident, but sort of from the community. And Alex indicated that the community was not supportive of a speed hump. Are you against a speed hump?
I am not against a speed hump. I just don't want to put that on someone to have to deal with the noise or that. If it's the only solution, then it's the solution for me, but I'd like to find something that's less disruptive to my neighbors. If we need a speed hump, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, and Alex, we've not deployed any of the, have we deployed temporary speed humps out there?
No. And we suggested that could have been something we could do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, anyway, do you have other data to present, Alex? I mean, I'll before I sort of give my 2 thoughts, my 2 cents.
No, I think tonight I think there's another step that we want to go out to the larger neighborhood and with a survey with a plan that could be implemented. So the next item would be to discuss the draft survey, discuss the measures that are put on here, get the committee's buy-in for those measures, and then go out and ask the neighborhood, are these acceptable? And especially in areas that people live right next to, make sure we get their feelings about a speed hump or a choker or whatever, to have that surveyed and that data brought back to the TSC.
So do we have, so the problem we're solving for, I mean, I love crosswalks and I think we should add crosswalks, right? Because I think crosswalks do signal that cars, when there's a pedestrian present, of course, they need to slow down when the zebra's there. But it does not, I have a crosswalk near my house. It doesn't change behavior. If there's no pedestrian there or they don't see a pedestrian, the car doesn't slow down. It is not and Bill, I want you to correct me. I don't see zebras as a speed mitigation strategy. I think it's appropriate for pedestrian safety, but it's not a speed mitigation strategy.
And I'm not going to correct you because I agree with you. They're not effective speed mitigation. In fact, I'm not sure you'd want to put a whole bunch of crosswalks with the assumption that you're going to slow people down. They do call attention to the fact that there could be a pedestrian there.
Right.
And,
So I think, so my sense is, I think we should paint a couple crosswalks, find a place to paint some crosswalks this year, because we should do it and it should help, but we still have another problem. I do not think, I think Bill has convinced me that the deploying stop signs, I don't have the table in front of me, but on any of those proposed, that doesn't feel like a good idea. I love the idea of a cram down or a bulb out. The problem with cram downs and bulb outs is they're incredibly expensive. And so, you know, Brian, I don't know how long you've been on, but dude, we can't afford green paint on McCaslin.
Okay.
So somebody's going to tell me that we're going to find money for a bulb out or a cram down. You know, I mean, we have temporary speed humps that we could install in a matter of, it's probably a wrong time now because the snow's coming, but in theory, we can install in weeks that only cost a couple grand. You know, they're sitting in a shop. They cost a couple $1,000s to put down. We could have before and after data and see if it mitigated a problem. I'm with you when I look at that data and I think, how are people at the top of the circle going slower than the bottom of the circle? It doesn't make any sense to me. But, you know, the data are what they are, you know.
Can I ask a question on the stop sign warrant?
Sure.
Is that just a recommendation by the code, or is it prevent that from happening with the stop sign at all?
Yeah, this is Bill, and it's not a hard and fast mandate one way or the other. Unlike a traffic signal warrant, for example, you should not install traffic signals that are not warranted. In fact, CDOT would never let you do it even if you wanted to on a state highway. But it's a little bit grayer area. But it's a suggestion and says you should not install always stops that are not warranted. Now, this is a national guideline, but it's not a mandate.
All right. I was gonna say, I guess I would disagree. I think the stop signs offer a great solution at a low price. That's just my opinion. I don't know if you'd have to do anything more with the curb cuts or not. It sounds like they're already there for the most part. I think.
Troy, thanks for the comment. One of the data we had, you know, we spend more time talking about Weldona on this committee than any other street in town. But the data we had around Weldona was that people started ignoring the stop signs, and it worried me as kind of a false sense of security if they're there and people are just constantly blowing through them. And so that's why I kind of worry about it, because if the warrant, you know, the warrant's there for a reason. It's not mandated, but if it's a recommendation, do you worry about, there's so few cars coming off Hyacinth, I can never say that road, that people might just assume that of course nobody's coming and they just might blow through it every day. In your experience, and I know it's not data, it's anecdotal, but, you know, thank you. You know, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't have an experience to offer. I don't live in that neighborhood. I don't see it on a regular basis, but it just seems like a cheap way.
I do have experience that suggests that when you have a stop sign that's not warranted like that, that the through street will ignore the always stop because they never see a reason to stop. If they come around that curve every day to that intersection and they never see a car coming out to stop for, then they will start rolling the stop sign, and pretty soon they're rolling it faster and faster, and then you might have a child that says, okay, there's a stop sign, they're going to stop for me, and they're not going to stop because they don't stop anymore. And that's why we don't.
Okay.
That's why we don't recommend it.
Yeah. What about changing, we're just thinking out loud here. and Brian, I want you to react to this, please, as a resident, and any other residents that are out there. What are your thoughts about making this the first street we experiment with 20's plenty? Change the speed limit throughout the whole street.
So Kevin, I'm supportive of that idea. 3 ideas real quick. 1, put zebras where you have ramps if it's low cost. 2, measure speed where you would actually install a feature like a speed bump. I'm supportive of temporary humps at Begonia, south of it, which is the uphill side of it. See what it does. And 3, 20 is plenty. I follow you, man.
Alex, that would be interesting because we could. You don't want to, Alex. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't want to do you don't want to do the temporary speed humps now with the snow coming, right?
Right, they'd probably be ripped up. I think we could do them in, March or April, but right now it's, they'll be gone.
But this gets us, yes, but this gets us opportunity to get some baseline data over the next 6 months. If we did what Brian just suggested, we could paint the zebras today at a relative, I think they're, memory serves me correct, about $750 per, right, for a zebra.
Yeah, about that.
So we could paint a couple zebras, plan for the temporary speed humps, and then, unfortunately, the signs around 20's plenty is that's the cost. And that has to go to the board. We can't do 20's plenty without going to the board.
So Kevin, you just lowered the speed limit on Rock Creek from 30 to 25. So now we share the same speed limit. I'm here for the long haul with you guys. So I can wait for a solution. I just wanted to get done someday before the kids run out in the street,
Right. Yeah. That's the problem with this committee. We things take too long, right? Welcome to government, dude.
Yeah, Kevin, my hesitation of doing 20's plenty on just here is it sort of, it can be a proof case, but I think holistically, I'd rather do what Boulder did and just go, broad strokes across the entire town. I think it could have value here, but when the posted speed limit is 25 and you have 57% of the cars going over the 85th percentile, that's nuts, right? So, and I think what I've heard from Bill and Alex historically is the speed limit sign is just one thing. Everyone drives the speed of the road, and while we could lower the speed limit, it's not going to change the behavior the way that we want to see it change, and that's going to take some sort of vertical calming. Because we're not going to pay Troy to sit out there and give a ticket to every single person going over 20, because that doesn't add any value either. And I'd rather see some permanent structure to help bring the speeds down on the east side seems to be the worst case.
Well, so what would be if Alex? So the precise next step, Alex, would be you guys recommend where the 2 speed humps go. Let's make sure we notify the neighborhood. Let's spend the next few months getting baseline data. And then in the spring, we put in the temporary speed humps and get actual data next summer for potential installation, presumably in, August, September, if the speed humps are doing what we think they're going to do, which is slow cars down. So far, by the way, they've been really effective. We're seeing a, reasonable reduction in speed. Troy, you shook your head. Do you not think speed humps are effective?
Yeah,
or?
My son walked down here with
Oh.
something.
Sorry.
He's saying not right now.
Good. So Alex, is that enough? Laura, I'm probably doing too much talking. Am I saying anything that you don't support, or do you have thoughts?
No, it's just, I was going to say, are we going to have a survey? Do we come up with a plan and have a wider distribution? Because, we had a nice neighborhood meeting, but it wasn't until the last 10 or 15 minutes where we were putting things on paper, looking at the various measures. So do you want to go out with a survey of neighborhoods saying, hey, we're going to do this? What's your reaction to it? Or does the TSC just want to, have a plan and implement it? I know it takes more time.
Well, I'm not sure what the survey would say right now. If we're not doing anything now because we're going into winter, we're not doing any road construction. And so why don't we take the winter to get data and then think about a survey in March or April saying, this is the speed that we have just recently observed. We're putting in speed, we plan on putting in speed humps at these temporary speed humps at these two locations. And maybe it's more of a notification than a survey. I don't know what question that I would ask. The community came back and, provided us some good data, and we've engaged them. And Brian is representing both, and I don't know if there are others, let me click. Are there others that have public comment?
I don't see anybody from your neighborhood. Hold on, let me,
Hey, Alex, do we have clear indication of exactly where the two speed humps are? Is one of them at the median island on East Yarrow, and then one's on top of the circle, or where are our speed humps?
Bill, one of my philosophies was that if you were going to have a raised pedestrian crosswalk, you would do a raised pedestrian crosswalk, and thus you'd protect the turning traffic where the stop signs might have been, and you would control the downhill speed as well.
So in the
And I would just
vicinity.
measure the speed at those points.
Okay.
Brian, the data
Well,
would tell us that one of the raised crosswalks or the temporary speed hump should be atop of the circle, because that's where cars are going. Even though there aren't a ton of cars, a few knuckleheads are going way too fast there.
well, I would
Number
put them
four,
at
I support
location. I would put them at location 3 and location 5.
That's where I was.
Try those, and we can put those two in, in March, whenever the weather clears up, and then we can take some additional speed data now, make sure we have the locations, the speed data locations where the neighborhood thinks. Brian can help us out on that. And then take after data once the temporary speed humps are in place for a few weeks.
And then get out there. And is there any reason why? I think, Alex, that's a plan. 3 and 5 for temporary speed humps. We'll take some data right around there, sort of in the few feet before, a few feet after. Let's figure out, or appropriate wherever, you're an engineer. Can we do a bunch of zebras on this? And can we do that this year?
Yeah, we can do it at location 2 and location 6. We can paint crosswalks. I'd probably just take one leg of the intersection. I'd probably put it on the north leg,
Yeah.
Location 2, and maybe the
Yeah.
north leg of location 6, and at least have those in place. And they
Alex,
could be permanent locations.
yeah, and beyond that, I mean, I would ask that you just walk along the Yarrow Circle, because there's a lot of depressed land that can connect to the other side. It's not just 2 and 6. It's also the west side of Hazen, the east side of Begonia. I mean, there's like all sorts of little places where last time I was up there, I was scratching my head in terms of why we didn't have crosswalks there, like the other parts of Rock Creek.
Yeah, so we can put one here at the
Yeah,
the
that
other
one.
side.
Yeah.
Both sides of Hazen, and then
Right.
Begonia. Yeah, there's a number of places. I think you guys have done a great job with this elsewhere in town. I think you could do the same thing here.
And Alex, by the way, my observation, I don't spend a ton of time in this neighborhood, but one of my daughters does. My daughter does have a friend here, and it's a super walkable, this reminds me almost of like original town. People are like out walking around in this neighborhood. So, and maybe it's because they're on the streets, because there isn't an obvious, big park, in the middle. So maybe they're walking on sidewalks, but yeah, I agree with Neil. This is a bit of an oversight. We should let's get some paint and get out there.
Especially with the CenturyLink open space. I mean, a lot of people in this neighborhood access that open space from all sorts of different spots. And let's make it easier to get from point A to point B.
Okay, so 3 locations, at least 3, and we'll look at others.
Yeah, at least 3.
Yeah.
And then we'll put the temporary speed humps at those 2 locations, 3 and 5, and then collect more data and return to you next spring.
Okay. Brian,
And
thumbs
Brian,
up.
and Brian, I'll send a notice out to your neighborhood to you and the people attended to let them know what we're going to be doing.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate your support. It's better than I expected. We look forward to the change, and we'll keep you posted, Alex.
All right, great. Thanks for working with us, Brian.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Neil. Kim.
Okay. Let me queue up my next one. I can remember how to do it.
Look at that, you're back on schedule.
Am I?
You're ahead.
Okay, so we had another meeting on September 22nd. And actually we had traffic calming requests from both Riverbend and Akron, so we can combine that neighborhood. Went through the traditional slides that we've used. This is the neighborhood that we kind of defined, kind of south of Pitkin, Riverbend kind of sweeps around. And then Akron also connects. There were a little bit different problems here. Yarrow was kind of a closed-end system, so you really didn't have cut-through traffic. But this neighborhood really did have cut-through traffic, and so we wanted to get into that issue a little bit more. Here's the unimpeded distances from this point, always stop on Riverbend to an always stop on Akron. That's 750 feet. And then 1,700 feet, the rest of Riverbend out to Coal Creek. And then 860 feet from Coal Creek to Riverbend on Akron. Here are the traffic volumes. Really not that high, high of 510 on Riverbend. And then 360 on Akron. 360 or so on Riverbend, and then drops down to 280. And those were taken back in, I think, November of last year. Speeds, again, 85th percentile speeds were not all that high, but we did have, in this particular area, 26 miles per hour. Again, these were the traffic volume information that we had that you reviewed last December.
We could throw that traffic volume up again. And that's daily.
Yeah, that's daily, but has it broken down by direction, and then averaging gives you speed, number of vehicles over 25 miles an hour, percentage over 25 miles an hour. So we attempted here to look at potential of cut-through traffic. So Bill, why don't you walk through some of the analysis we did on potential for cut-through? And
Sure.
I have these routes, and then we have some speed data. So talk about these routes.
So we looked at two different potential cut-throughs. One was along Akron, in the green, from neighbors to the northeast. And if they were going to go to Costco or something, where would they go? How would they go through this neighborhood?
Right. If you came from Amherst or Waldona neighborhood, you have the choice of going on the red route or the green route.
Right. And so we measured the distance of each route. We estimated the time of travel given the speed limits on each route. And we also imposed the penalty for turns, right or left turns, and or going through stop signs along the way. And so we calculated potential travel time, green, 3-minute travel time, and in red, if I can read it, Alex, it's 3.1. 2.8 minutes. So very similar travel time. The red would be the non-cut through route that stays on the bigger roads, and to bypass the Akron neighborhood. And yet the time is very similar.
Bill, just a quick question.
Yep.
On the times for the red route, that is non-school crossing time, right? That's just.
Well, no, I have both, and that I don't know if you can read that, but 2.8 minutes is non-school time, and 3.1 minutes is school time.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, I couldn't read that before. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Hey,
we-
Neil, not that you're since you live in this hood, not that you're a cut thrower, but does this ring true for you?
Absolutely. No, I mean, this is everybody cutting through on the green to avoid the school zone on Rock Creek. And
Right, but
what's-
it's
it's
if you're standing,
immaterial. No, I mean, this is what's just so silly about it is it's a de minimis change, but the perception is that you're moving as opposed to going slow. And this is, and the numbers, you know, I just want to point this out before we go too far. The numbers that are going to use that green line will probably go up once the Anderson project is complete.
Right. So that, you know, and Alex, if you skip forward to the next slide, so we looked at that Route 1 was the, I think was the red route, and Route 2 was the green route, and very similar time estimates, but one was significantly shorter than the other. And so would that likely be a cut through route? Yes. So along Akron, we think that would likely be a cut through. And so that's really the results of that analysis. Next map shows the other potential cut through to use Riverside and a portion of Akron, or some portion of Riverside only, with the red, yellow, and purple or violet colors, 3 different choices. And in this case, the fastest 2.2 minutes on the violet, that's the route we would want folks to take and not cut through. And so that one was a little bit longer, only a little bit longer, but the fastest. And the other, the yellow or the red routes were incorporated part of the neighborhood as a cut through to get to the same destination with no time savings and similar distances. So those would be less likely to have as cut through routes.
This is kind of the same analogy of people jumping off the highway because it's not moving to use surface streets because they think they'll get there faster, but it ends up being the same, but you feel like you're moving because you're not stuck in a traffic jam.
Right. And you know, whether, you know, certainly the signal on Rock Creek could have make a difference, but for the most people using that route, they would arrive on a green signal. So it just says that we certainly think there could be some cut through along Akron, and to a lesser extent along the Riverbend portion over to Akron.
Okay, so we went through tools in the toolbox, so just speed through these. And let's see, so
the problem, so I want to be clear. So the problem we were trying to solve on Yarrow was speed, safety. The problem we're solving for here is less around traffic calming and more just around trips per day.
Well,
Are we trying to slow anybody? I mean, there was the 26 mile, but are we really trying to slow anybody down here?
I think there's a perception if you slow people down, then that it becomes less attractive as a cut-through route. And we had several people from the neighborhood that will maybe could help us out in a minute to talk about what the problems are with their perception and whether these measures will be helping things. But I think at least in location 4, there was a pretty strong sentiment that there was speeding up in that area. There were talk about pedestrian crossings and pedestrian protection, which is also shown here. So we had 4 potential measures that I think the group had a good consensus on. This was at location 1 at Indiana and Riverbend. You know, right here, again, the volume on Indiana is probably higher than the volume on Riverbend. And this, to me, would be a natural location for a stop condition, because I don't think you get a whole lot of people that are traveling through on Riverbend, but you have people are probably going to school and so forth that are using Indiana. So you probably have a lot of turning movements on and off of Indiana onto Riverbend. We don't, for some reason, there weren't any crosswalks at this location. There's no ramps on the north side of Riverbend. We just installed this crosswalk a few months ago, and the reason why it had ramps, we didn't want to go to expense right away, knowing what was going on with the neighborhood, that we were going to come back to this. So we didn't have ADA ramps to put crosswalks at this location.
So Alex, before you leave this, I just want to clarify for Laura and Kevin, if you don't know this, on the Indiana piece of it, there is a stop sign there before you get onto Riverbend, but there is no stop sign on Riverbend going east or west.
Right.
And that's different than if you go a little bit further up Riverbend, because then it's a three-way stop over there. This is just a stop only for Indiana.
Right. So there seemed to be a pretty good consensus. Let's make this an all-way stop. Let's put the crosswalks here. Here's where we should have the crosswalks, and provide this as a way of people getting to the park and getting good pedestrian circulation. So I think that was a pretty good consensus on this particular one. Moving on, this is Akron. Short stretch, kind of a stub road between Coal Creek and this cross street. I forget what the name of that one was. But there's an opportunity to put a median island, an entry feature. We could also add chokers to really slow traffic down through here and present, you're entering neighborhood, let's slow traffic down as you enter Akron.
As Mesa Court.
Mesa Court. So. And then this is actually on Coal Creek Drive. This is the type of thing we would put an entry feature, and then we could put some chokers further down. Okay, going backwards, sorry. All right, the next location was on Riverbend near Montgomery Court, which is here. A lot of concern about traffic in this area here. It's like a vertical curve, I think, that comes up and down. So this would be a good location for a speed hump. A number of support from these residents here about speeding in this area. Several people are on the phone call today to talk about that. And then finally, you see the trail system going to the lake and the park. This crossing not only serves Laird Court, but it also connects over to this court. So we already have a painted crosswalk, and maybe there's some enhancements that we could do at neck downs or other techniques to enhance this particular crossing. So that is what we had. I'd like to call on Stan. Stan's been kind of my contact and helped organize the meeting and so forth. So Stan, if you want to comment on
Sure.
the neighborhood
Would you
meeting.
mind putting up the slide that shows the 4 proposed solutions
Sure.
that we talked about?
Then Stan, if you could just introduce yourself as you get started for the record.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Stan Jarrett. I'm a resident on Riverbend Street, and I submitted the original calming request and had 14 of my neighbors also sign that original request. We had 17 people participate in the meeting last month on the 22nd of September. And as Alex said, it was, I thought, a very good meeting, a lot of discussion. And I'd like to provide a little more insight into these 4 locations and some of the detailed concerns. I won't take a lot of time, but there are 4 other people on from Riverbend Street who are also dialed in tonight. And we can have them talk too. Starting with location 1, one of the big concerns there is that this is where everybody comes to go to Superior Elementary School. A lot of young kids live in not just along Riverbend, but in other places. And it's a very busy time, particularly, around the 8:30 and 9:30 timeframe. And a number of my neighbors have said, who have elementary schools kids, that it's kind of difficult to get across the street from the park side over to Indiana because of the traffic. And it's not like there's a huge amount, but it does go pretty quickly there. And they would like a little bit more structure so that people do slow down. And if you look at the data, the fastest speed was going uphill past location number 1, where the measurements were, right above that, and the cul-de-sac that was there. So that was kind of really the impetus there, was it will slow down that long break going uphill because people tend to drive faster going uphill. And it also provides a little bit more structure and safety for all the kids going to school and coming home in the afternoon. A lot of kids want to go to the park on their way home. So, and now going to location 2, there was some folks from Akron dialed in, and as Bill Fox described, there is cut through. You can ask any of the people dialed in, or even the folks that were in the meetings. Our perception is that that is a serious problem, and you saw that, over 500 cars average per day just between the Akron Riverbend intersection up to the intersection there at Riverbend Way and Riverbend Court. Yeah, that's up to just a little bit. That's Montgomery Court right there. So right up to there. The actual measurement was just south of the red line that you see for location 4 for November last year. A number of folks, the folks from Akron, talked about how do we slow the traffic coming off of Coal Creek, getting onto Akron. And both Bill and Alex talked about the choke methods or putting a median that would slow down people just, turning at high speeds. We also talked about that crossing there, and there's really no protection. So location number 3. And the discussion that came up was, how about an enhanced pedestrian crossing similar to some of the others that are in the local neighborhood, but it would have to come away from the corner there. My wife and I walk there a lot. We always have to stop on the sidewalk after coming out of the park to wait for somebody to stop. About half the time people are very polite and will stop. About half the time they do not. I don't know other people's experiences on that. But we did have a lot of discussion, and the residents on Akron did not want the speed bump enhanced pedestrian crossing farther to the east because of the ice issue during the winter. That would really significantly build up because of all the trees and the houses there. And we've experienced that on Riverbend. Quite a few of my neighbors, in fact, the last 4+ years, the town has come in with front loaders to clear out ice in the gutters. In the February timeframe in particular. Location number 4, when I put in the request summer of last year, one of the things I described in there is we were worried about the speeds. At that time, there were a dozen kids, of which a dozen kids who were elementary school or younger. We're now up to 19 kids in the neighborhood. 2 are high school, the rest are elementary and younger. A lot of little kids. So we're very concerned about that. Speeding is a real problem with the data. If you look at the data from November, it showed that the 9 to 10 o'clock time frame going uphill on Riverbend, just to the right of the red line there, was the worst time. About 200 cars were going through in that 9 to 10 o'clock time frame. 20 of them were speeding. Speeding, in my definition, is 28 miles an hour to the highest, which was 36 miles an hour. So the other problem that we discussed in the meeting is that if you start from where the potential speed hump is, you see how it curves. That's all going downhill, and at times a lot of the times people going downhill to the east swing out into the middle of the road. They don't always see the cars coming up until the last moment from the Akron Riverbend intersection. My observations is that a lot of people do roll through the stop sign, kind of like Troy described at the Akron Riverbend three-way stop, coming from Akron onto Riverbend. We see it also going from Riverbend down slope left onto Akron. The crosswalks were there, pretty good stopping when pedestrians are there is what I have noticed. But if nobody's there, they just kind of roll on through. So the big thing with location number 4, and there was some discussion about where to put the speed bump. The neighbor on the corner of Montgomery, whose driveway goes into Montgomery Court, yeah, right there, said, well, why not put it just, along his side there? And Alex and Bill were estimating putting it between the two neighbors are there, kind of equal distance between their driveways. So that kind of gives you a little bit more flavor. There are 4 other people on Riverbend who are dialed in, and we could certainly give them an opportunity to speak their concerns. So Carolyn Obel and Joan Mickus, Charlotte and Susan Ogilvie are the other 4 people.
Yeah, I think Stan, I live right across from Stan. This is Susan Ogilvie. And I think you did a pretty good job kind of explaining the challenges there.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Charlotte. I live just up the street from Stan towards Purple Park. And I'm one of the new neighborhood members, and I have 2 young children. Haven't lived here very long. I have noticed some cars, often driven by teenagers, going pretty quickly down the hill. But it looks like the data shows that up the hill is even, they're more likely to go quickly. One of my concerns is I've moved from a very flat neighborhood to a very hilly neighborhood. And my kids, and I've noticed a lot of other people's kids, are on wheels, rollerblades or scooters, bicycles. So the kids coming down their driveways can be going more quickly than I wish they would sometimes. And so if cars are going quickly as well, it just seems like potential for a lot of last minute swerving. So from my perspective, I think it couldn't hurt to discourage people from using this route as a cut through, and maybe even reminding people to put the brakes on, since my kids are frequently on wheels. So thanks for describing all that, Stan.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Stan. Joan Mickus. I live right at the corner there at the top of the hill by the stop sign. And quite often I notice people not stopping and kind of just rolling through and gaining speed. And, there are a lot of small children there, as well as dogs like mine. And, I would like to see, I think the speed bump thing is the most effective, in my opinion. Otherwise, I agree with all the other things Stan was saying.
Can I ask a quick question to Stan, Alex, Bill, or anybody else that wants to weigh in? As you look at Akron, and I think Kevin asked a really good question at the beginning in terms of what behavior are we trying to change here? Is it just cut through? Is it just speed? Or is it some combination of both? And I'm a little intrigued around the neighborhood meeting and looking at that chunk of Akron and why a speed bump was not considered. I do understand that a raised or enhanced pedestrian crossing could do both, but was there any discussion of a speed bump sort of between locations 2 and 3?
There was.
Yeah.
It definitely was discussed, potentially to the east of where the raised enhanced crossing would be. There's some side yard frontage on one side, and there's a fair amount of space to put one on the south side. So we discussed it in that block. We also discussed it in the first block where the median island is illustrated. So we did discuss speed humps as an option in many locations through this neighborhood.
Okay.
Yes, one of the other places, just to add on to Bill, was just past the Mesa Court intersection, where the house on the south has a side load garage, and the house on the north also has a side load. But in the people who dialed in from Akron, who really thought it would be more effective closer to the Riverbend Akron intersection, as people built up speed going up there. And so both Bill and Alex talked to the group, I think there was 17 of us, about you can't put it too close to the stop sign because they're already slowing down for it. And so that had originally caused it to be the speed bump being a little bit more east in front of the houses. But then the people on Akron said, that's really not a good idea with all the ice. And so improving the pedestrian crossing was kind of getting two things, so to speak. You kind of slow them down far enough away from the stop sign, but also giving a little bit more protection for the people walking through. A lot of people actually go through either coming from Laird Court and going over to go over by the ponds off of Pitkin, down through here. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic during the day, is my observation.
Stan, why is it you think that a speed hump too close to a stop sign is not effective?
What I understood in the discussions was that once people start getting closer to a stop sign, they actually start slowing down. And so if you had it farther back, that would kind of break up that particular length of space there. I'm not an expert on traffic control.
But and welcome to my world, right? I'm not an expert on anything, particularly traffic. So, but thank you so much for, you definitely come across as an expert. I actually have, I don't know this neighborhood nearly as well as you, so I have a cheat sheet. I'm actually looking at two different maps.
Okay.
One with road numbers on them. Why? So one of the things that's just so striking about this neighborhood compared to the last neighborhood we looked at is how many trail connections there are. I really like leveraging a trail connection for a raised pedestrian crosswalk, not unlike what we've just recently done on Torrey's. I don't know if you've been down there yet. That road is, I haven't
been down there
over
a while,
it,
but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, so we just put one in. The city just put one in. I haven't driven over it yet, but apparently Alex knows us. The road's open. And there's one, of course, on Indiana, on the other side of Rock Creek Parkway. There's a couple raised, and there's of course one on Pitkin, and again on the other side of Rock Creek. I like the raised crosswalk on that connects the pedestrian way. Is there anywhere on Riverbends that we should be looking at?
Well,
that you guys didn't look at? So when I look, for example, Alex, right? I suppose it's, you know, kind of just south of Riverbend and Akron there. That's not a stop sign, right?
So if you, Alex, if you move to the, if you're talking trailheads, is that what you're talking about? Just right?
Not an official trail. Trailhead means something to people like Alex.
Okay.
Where the trail goes through the road, right?
Well, there's a couple locations here. You know, you're connecting from a trail over to a sidewalk. Over here, you same thing. You know, here's one here, but it's at an all-way stop, so it's already.
And there's a crosswalk there.
Yeah, crosswalk. I'm sorry. There's an all-way stop and there's a crosswalk, so that's pretty well protected.
Well, there's not an all-way stop.
It's a three-way stop.
Sure, it is all way.
Yeah.
There's only 3. Yeah.
Right there. It's all there's stop bars and on all approaches. On this right here, I'm saying an enhanced pedestrian crossing. That could end up being a raised crossing. We have an intersection, so we need to figure out how do we put a raised crossing near an intersection. So that's going to require some study if we want to do that, or we neck it down and reduce the crossing width as another possibility. So that's why I'm saying enhanced. We do something here that protects the pedestrian, but also provides some speed control. So that's where we're looking at that point. On the other side, we have the trail that kind of ends right here. So whether you do it here or someplace along here is a potential. You know, you could do it, right here if you wanted to do it to provide additional measures along this part of Riverbend. So those are the two locations that I would.
But it doesn't solve for the highest speed was the uphill on East Riverbend north of where you just proposed.
Right here.
Right.
Right.
No, Riverbend.
So
Spot number 4.
the highest speed going uphill
Is
was
around there.
right about there. Yes.
So the all-way stop would help that to some degree.
Right. So you have 2 all-way stops. That's how we broke up that long stretch by putting all-way stop. Again, we would have crosswalks here, so you have people crossing at that location. Would you really want one along that area?
Again, Bill, we might be breaking your rule where it's an always stop, less around pedestrian safety, more around traffic mitigation.
Well, that one in my mind was different. Clearly there's higher traffic volume here than any of the intersections in the Yarrow neighborhood. It also is at a T where we have heard a lot of concern about the speed of turning traffic coupled with school children walking through that intersection. And it is near a logical crossing to the park.
Right.
So
Right. And you're right. You've got greens and right. That's a noticeable difference. You got green space where we want people walking to. I mean, I'll just preview what I want to get feedback from my colleagues. I like the 4-way stop there. I've got 4 things. I like the all-way stop there. I like the raised pedestrian crosswalk on that trail crossing. 2 raised, 1 there, and then 1 below location 1 on that. And then I also, Alex, I think the work you guys did 5 or so years ago on Coal Creek with the median island, that was a game changer for that neighborhood. It signals anybody that's cutting through to go to Target knows they're cutting through a pedestrian neighborhood, and people will still cut through. But I know that was expensive, but that to me was a game changer. I love median islands. I think it will enhance. I think the cut through is going to be a real problem when when Lanterns gets built. I think it's going to enhance the aesthetics of that community, and it significantly reduces. I think it really sends that message and will significantly reduce. So that would be my 4 suggestions. Again, sort of in reverse order: finding a way to afford a median island in 2021 or 2022 because they're expensive for those watching. The immediate installation of an all-way stop on Riverbend and what is that, Gibson, which will slow cars down. And then when the weather and budget is appropriate, as soon as humanly possible, 2 enhanced pedestrian crossings, one at location 3 and one south of location, or I guess east of location 1.
So when you said the immediate stop sign, did you really mean Indiana instead of the other road?
You said
We're-
good.
You said Gibson, and I thought you were really talking about Indiana. And
Well, I don't know. Don't we? So there's no, what are the stop signs there now? I'm sorry, I should know. I'm not there enough. There's nothing?
there's one on Indiana to get on to Riverbend. And then there's stop signs at the next 2 cul-de-sacs going north.
Okay.
Riverbend has the flow through, and then you have a 3-way stop at Akron and Riverbend.
So we
So that, so Indiana and Riverbend is not a 3-way stop now?
no.
No,
Oh, that's a no-brainer. All right, I missed that.
Yeah, that's one that we certainly could support from a traffic and operational and pedestrian perspective.
All right, so those would be my 4 suggestions. 2 pedestrian crossings in 2021, enhanced pedestrian crossings in 2021, immediate 3-way stop at Indiana and Riverbend, and, you know, budgeting, planning for a really nice median island to enhance this neighborhood and discourage cut-through traffic. Neil, Laura, what do you guys think, and folks in the community?
I agree with that approach. And I also, Kevin, agree with what you had said earlier around my ideal is when we can put those pedestrian crossings at trails where possible. So just something to consider going forward.
I agree with most of it. You know, so the 3-way stop at Indiana is a no-brainer, and that's a slam dunk. The raised crossings that connect to the trail network, both on Riverbend and Akron, make a ton of sense to me. The potential choker or island at location 2, I'm on board with that. It's just the one issue is ultimately any car coming south on Coal Creek is going to be facing 2 islands on both sides. So that's just, it's something new for the drivers. I don't have a problem with that. But I actually also really do support location 4 for a speed bump. I think that the traffic volume between Akron and Pitkin is significant, in that downward slope with the curve. Again, I think this is something, Kevin, you've railed against. You know, these roads, especially in this area, are designed horribly. They're really wide. They're downward sloping. They curve around, you know, some old growth trees, and it's just, you know, none of us would do it this way. And I think that the location the community has come up with the speed bump here has a lot of value in terms of, you know, both 2 things. One is, you know, bringing the speeds down, but also just discouraging the use of Riverbend and Akron as a cut through. And Rock Creek is the arterial. Let's get people on the arterial.
Right. Alex, how many temporary speed humps do we have again? Do we have 2 or
Not
3?
enough.
We have 2.
We only have 2?
And we
Yeah,
could,
no, I fully
You
agree
need to
on,
introduce yourself.
sorry, I'm Taylor Ogilvy. But location for the speed hump there, I think is super important, and I agree with everything else. So, but
Yeah, I agree, Taylor. I think you guys are right. And that's where we saw the highest speed.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great, you know, when you look at, again, I'm looking at a different map than what's on, but you know, there's so many homes there, and it's really important. And thank you for everybody that's commented. It's super helpful to know just how many young kids moved in that neighborhood, right? And we all, you know, I'm a big believer that, I'm sorry, I know people disagree, but I think kids should be out in the streets playing and ride their bikes. And yeah, they should be careful, but cars don't own the streets, dude. Sorry, you know, kids should be out there too. And if we got to slow down idiots, let's slow them down. So I agree. Taylor, the issue is we have 2 temporary speed humps in the shop, and we just deployed them somewhere else. So Alex, I think we have to buy a 3rd. Is that something we could do?
well,
I mean,
I
before
guess
you answer that, Alex, I mean, I guess I'm, you know, with Yarrow, we have a lot of questions with this stretch, I think we have a lot of information. I don't know that we need to deploy the temporary speed hump here. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not sure that it's going to give us a tremendous amount of data like what we need on Yarrow in terms of the exact location.
I agree.
I'm not sure what you said that I would agree or disagree with. Say that again, Neil. Sorry.
What I said, what I was basically going for is I don't know that a temporary speed hump at location 4 is going to give us a tremendous amount of extra data. I think everything we know about speed humps to date suggests that location 4 makes all the sense in the world. And while we can do the temporary speed hump and then look to do a permanent speed hump at the end of next year, I'm all for moving with a permanent location.
Skip the temporary, go right to the permanent. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think we have a pretty good agreement. We don't have neighbors that are opposing that location. It's been established that there's a cost for putting the temporary one in and out. I'd rather just put the permanent one in.
And the permanent,
Kevin, I'd
and the,
like to echo something or leverage off of what you said a few minutes ago about kids in the neighborhood. So I'm an original resident of Riverbend, moved in 1991. In the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen a lot of couples moving out, kind of downsizing or moving to other communities that are more, I'll say, senior oriented.
Right.
And the repopulation has been tremendous along this corridor of elementary school kids. It's almost what it was when I moved here. So I think it's going to start to happen even more in other parts of this little area because there are a lot of people who have been there a long time, for decades. And I just think we're going to see more and more of this repopulation coming in.
yeah, thanks for that, Stan. I first of all, it's such a, there's this neighbor, it's so wonderful. So many people in this neighborhood came together for a proposed solution that you guys all seem to be aligned on. We had a different experience with a different neighborhood. So this is very pleasant.
Thank you. We worked hard to kind of talk about it, as a community and listen to each other.
Alex, just from a real cost, hard dollar cost. So we could put a 3-way stop in for a couple $1,000s. The raised pedestrian crosswalks need to be budgeted. Then those, just so everybody knows, those are probably in the $15,000 to $25,000 range. Alex, installing one of the temporary speed humps is a few thousand, and we have the temporary, in theory. What's the cost of not a raised pedestrian crosswalk, but a permanent speed hump, not unlike the Weldona permanent speed hump?
Well, it's about 12 to 15,000, and the temporary speed hump again is probably a couple thousand to put it in and a couple thousand to take it out. So it's about 5,000 to put it in and take it out, total.
And I hate to play the budget game, but any chance we could do this year?
Okay, well, talk about process. I mean,
I just know what the budget for next year looks like, so that's what.
Right. Yeah, we could do it this year. I mean, we could probably get it installed. The speed hump. Anyway, we can't do the raised pedestrian crossings.
I agree.
My concern here is we have cut through traffic. This is similar, not quite the same as Weldona. Do you want to have a survey of people outside the neighborhood?
Yeah, Alex, you had a neighborhood meeting. So again, I'll be unpopular. I can't talk about it. I'll be unpopular. I don't care about the people that are cutting through the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I mean, Alex, you've heard this from me long before I ever showed up on the board. When we have these surveys that include people that are actually using it as a cut through that don't live in the neighborhood opining, it drives me nuts because they're the ones that don't want to end the cut through. And I kind of feel that with all the work you've done here already, the 3-way stop sign, I think we pulled out a half dozen stop signs from Weldona, so we should have some leftovers in a shed somewhere. So you could stick those in the ground for $100. We can do that tomorrow. And then, the speed hump on that, I guess we call it location 4, we look to get that done this year. And everything else, we start scoping out what that needs to be, because, Stan brought this to the TSC, like a year and a half ago. And obviously COVID happened and things took longer. But, I want to be respectful of the amount of time that this community has poured into this. And they're wildly in support of it, rather than kicking it over to another survey. A lot of folks that will be negatively affected by this because they'll lose their shortcut.
I'm with you, Neil, entirely. I think we just execute on it. And by the way, the speed hump, everybody should go over to Weldona and drive over the speed hump to see what it feels like, because this is not your parking lot speed hump that you slow down to 5 miles an hour. You're going to be able to hit this thing. I mean, you could, if you hit it at 15, you're not going to spill your coffee. You hit it at 25, you're probably going to spill your coffee. But it can be hit at 25 miles an hour. It's not optimal. But this is not a giant disruptive sudden speed bump. These are humps. They're intended to, get you slightly below 25 miles an hour.
And I think Alex has improved the design between Weldona and then the Castle Peak and Pitkin ones as well.
Yeah.
I think the angle is a little bit different. So you do have to slow down a little bit more than you do on the Weldona ones.
Right.
So at the risk of, I know this will not endear me to those on this call, and I would like to be clear that I'm very supportive of these traffic calming measures that we have here. However, I do just want to state publicly that I do disagree, Kevin, with you and Neil around not caring about the cut-through drivers. Only in that I think it can be difficult to determine what is a road. Well, we have some guidelines around what's a road's intended use versus is someone a cut-through driver. But I think the argument could be made, I think anyone who doesn't live on my street is cutting through to get to somewhere else. But some of them may consider that their main path. I do think it's really important to look at the overall ecosystem of the community when we're making decisions. So I just would like to state on the record that I do value the opinions of those who are just driving through. I think that is important to consider. That said, in this particular case, we've certainly noticed this. We haven't heard any dissent. And I think these traffic calming measures are great. So
yeah, Laura,
thanks that on the record.
Yeah, thanks for keeping us in check. And I don't want to be disrespectful to people, because I think you're right. All roads should be open for everybody. But my point is that we're not, if we were closing a road, then I think you survey the entire community, because then it becomes somebody's safety issue, or they like a tree there, or they run a carpool there. I think it's, but all we're doing is asking people to drive the speed limit, right? Yep. I mean, that's it. And this is a traffic calming measure to ask somebody to drive the speed limit and stop being an idiot. So that's what I mean, that if somebody in a peripheral neighborhood says, oh, I want to continue to be able to drive, 28 miles an hour or 29 miles an hour, and you shouldn't stop me. I care a lot more about the homes on East Riverbend than I do on somebody that lives over on Amherst who's using that as a cut through. So that was my point. Okay.
Totally get where you guys are both going. I just wanted to make sure I stated that.
No, but it is a valid point, Laura, because this one's a bit of an anomaly because it's so short and it's such an obvious cut through, but there are a lot of other areas. And I think Castle Peak's a perfect example of where, given the long stretches, it's hard to argue that it is not the main thoroughfare versus a shortcut for someone else. So it is, a valid point that we do need to be careful that we don't, use what I said, a blanket, across the town, because each one of these trees is each one of these roads is its own specific animal, right, given the layout.
Right.
And I think along with that, I also just like to be careful about always saying, well, we're going to err on the side of safety no matter what. Certainly, I'm a huge proponent of safety, but my counter argument is always the safest thing for the entire town of Superior would be to ban all cars in it. But that's not a practical option, and we're not going to do that. So we always have to kind of find that balance, which I think we're doing here. So
right. I would be down for that, by the way.
Only if we put in your gondola, Kevin.
Right, the gondola 2020. Okay. All right. Alex, do we need to, since this is going to fall under, so I think it sound, I think we could execute on this without another survey. I think it's going to fall below Matt's purchase threshold. This feels like something we should be able to do in 2020, right?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that I'd like to try to get the TSC notes together to go out with the digest on Friday. And then maybe Kevin, you can present those to the board. I'll have an updated map here of what of those 5 measures, and the 2 things we would proceed with this year with the always stop, the crosswalks, and then the speed hump. Those 2, and then if you can present that and get their not consensus, their
yeah, as a matter of practice, Alex, I don't even want people to nod their head. I will ask them to get in touch with you offline. And if somebody wants a properly noticed meeting, then they should request that.
Okay.
And then we'll have a properly noticed meeting in the second time in October.
Okay.
So.
And then Alex, just a question, so, and this is possibly dated, right? The end of June, in the CIP budget for 2020, we had about 50,000 budgeted for traffic calming, and as of the end of June, we'd spent 13. Presumably, the bike lane changes and enhancements on the Castleton are coming out of the traffic calming, or that's coming out of something else? Because where I'm going with this,
I was gonna take that and the Torrey's Peak raised pedestrian crossing. So you're pretty close. I think there may be enough for the speed hump.
Okay. That's where I was going. Perfect.
Yep, I did the same math, Neil. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak to the 3 trustees real quickly, if it's all right. First of all, Kevin, Neil, and Laura, I just want to say thank you very much for listening to all the stuff. And Neil, I know you made a comment about, we've waited a long time to kind of get, through the process. But Alex and his staff, Bill, have worked with us, and it's been very straightforward and easy. The process works. Give us time as a community to understand what we wanted and how things could come together and people look at it. And I want to thank the 3 of you for, your willingness to listen, kind of talk and ask about it, and, comprehensively think about what are the impacts, not only to our immediate neighborhood, but, the rest of the community. And so thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Righto.
All right. That's all I had.
Okay. Any other closing comments? Alex, do we have another TSC this year? I know we don't always do December.
We may not. I was planning on bringing the surveys back in December, but we may have 20 is plenty action on that. So it may be touch and go whether we have one or not. But if I can get 20 is plenty, something on that, then we would have one. If not, we may want to skip that one.
Alex, does 20 is plenty need to come back to the TSC or go straight to the board? I feel like we've talked about it last time, and the TSC is in support. So
yeah, I need to look at my notes and see what my next steps are. I've been concentrating on these 2.
That's fine. I don't want you to bring it back here to get the same answer from us again.
Okay.
I don't think it's changed, in other words.
The other one we have is El Dorado, and we just collected some speed data. So we're evaluating that. That may be something we could discuss, but
Alex, I noticed there's a ton of, while we have a couple of minutes, I noticed I was out running the other day and there's a ton of rubber
hoses.
There's a ton of hoses that are out.
As we talked at our last meeting about traffic counts. Normally we do those every 5 years. And we normally do it in conjunction with the census and the TSC's direction I asked whether we should do it this year with COVID, and your direction is, well, go ahead. We're always going to have that issue with
Okay,
COVID.
so that's what those are. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, so they're all over the town coverage counts. And we may have that to talk about at December as well.
Alex, just something, I don't think it's for a committee meeting. But I'm curious how much those cost versus just buying data, buying cell phone data, which I know you could obviously buy the data right now because our phones are tracking how fast we're going and where we're going. So, and maybe that's still too expensive to buy that data, but I know those rubber hoses aren't.
Well, the rubber hoses pick up all the data. You can get Streetlight that kind of has a sample. And Bill, I don't know if you have any issues. I think it's 15 to 30% is what you're picking up with that type of data. So you can answer some questions, but you can't get really the daily traffic counts.
Okay, so the rubber hoses are the best. That's the best. That's still your gold standard.
Right.
Okay. Okay. And then that how much we love the raw data. So as you collect the data, I know you guys like to summarize it, but the three of us will.
You'll get plenty of it, yeah.
Great. Okay, anything else?
That's all I.
All right, guys.
Great.
Thank you. And
Great.
thanks for all the members of
Thank
the
you.
community out there. Thanks,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Thank you again.
care.
Good night.